and bring in, in light what we're up against. And the agencies that took the time to come down, spend all morning to kind of bring some realistic viewpoint, what we're challenged with. It's not that simple. We want recreation in this county. This board has spent a lot of money trying to promote its recreation program. And what we have is a regional park that the city of Hollister, I see a couple of council members here, let's work together. Develop a park that maybe has a fishing hole in it where you could take your kids and walking trails. And there's plenty of land to do so. Unfortunately, with San Justo, there's a lot of work and a lot of time that's going to be consumed trying to figure out that future. Today, we have an area. Let's work there. Let's put our money there on something that may not work in the long term. So that's my message. And for those that like fishing, I like I said earlier, I like fishing. I go to McAlpine Lake right now, right outside San Juan Bautista. They stock it. It's ideal for kids. Try that. And I'm not saying we give up on San Justo. Let's keep working hard. San Bernardino County needs to stay as a partner and work with the Bureau of Reclamation and the Water District and see after NEPA what kind of project we could put together and go from there and see what the funding is like. That's where I'm at.
Thanks, Supervisor. Supervisor Munzer?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The speaker that brought up Hernandez Reservoir, that was something that happened, I think, before any of us were really old enough to have effect on it. And I've always felt that was a crime, the way that came about, that the taxpayers were sold a bond, as I understand. The land was purchased, the reservoir was built, and then the land bordering the reservoir was sold off. And because at the time somebody decided that residents of Hollister wouldn't want to drive all the way down there anyway to fish. Like I said, I've always felt that was a crime. This is a little bit different. I'm up at the reservoir, every so often. I've seen the backside where Homeland Security money has been spent. I believe it's K-Rails, I can't really remember right now, blocking the back dam because they were concerned about terrorism and an attack on that dam. Even though it's small, back when terrorists were flying into buildings, they were concerned. We had a presentation that Sarah arranged for us. Supervisor Bertello and I were there. The sheriff was there, and he was in the room, and he left again. But not bioterrorism. Eco-terrorism, thank you, was brought up. And I talked to him afterwards. He was very concerned about that. Somebody could have the ill intention of going in there, getting sufficient amount of water, removing it, and affecting these other water bodies in the state to the tune of the millions and billions of dollars that was discussed today. And how would we stop that if the reservoir was open again? So all these things have been discussed. Is what has been weighing on us. Somebody, maybe Marty, brought up, I wish we knew who infected that reservoir, because I would like to go back after them. But apparently, if any of these zebra mussels get out into any other body of water in California, they're going to be able to figure out where those zebras came back, and they're going to be coming after us, as it was brought out also, because there is potential litigation involved in this, and the county of San Benito could be on the hook for it. With all that said, as I said earlier, I am wanting to have that facility open again for recreation. And I would ask staff to bring back a funding analysis for a control plan, i.e. recreational plan, as soon as possible. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Munzer. Supervisor Marjorie Barrios.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Supervisor Munzer, that is a great plan. I will support it. It's good to hear that there is a control plan, recreation plan, that we're not waiting for NEPA, like you said, for them to make their plan or decision. But I say let's not drop the ball. Let's do what we are doing now and make sure that we're proactive, we're assertive, and let's take those agencies to task and say, we're waiting. Give us the answers. Do it sooner than later, and just not drop it. We know how it's important to the community. So, thank you, Mr. Chair.
Supervisor De La Cruz.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. First of all, I'd like to thank Mr. Chair for allowing to put this item on the agenda for staff and Sarah. Thank you very much, and for the members of the federal and state government and the Water District being here and informing the public on the status and the update of the San Justo Lake. I had a lot of members of my district talk to me and saying, you hold the power to opening up that lake, open it up. And I tried to explain that it's not as easy. We needed members of outside the community that come and talk to the community that this is the status. And in fact, Mr. Bill, he spoke earlier. Bill Cento spoke earlier, and he's actually one of them that him and I have been talking for about 5 years on the status of San Justo. And thank you, Bill, for being here. I do appreciate it. But at the same time, I too want to have that open up for recreational, and I think if direction is to do a recreational plan, then I'm on board too. I will support your position, Supervisor Munzer, and work on it and ASAP, because I guess the public is tired of waiting 8+ years and another 5 years. So maybe this can speed up the process, and we'll get a true cost of what's going to cost, and maybe we can have the city Hollister, San Juan, and San Miguel County and the Water District come in and work together as a partnership on how to fund this and how to develop this plan. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Supervisor. And, in reference to the control plan or a recreation plan, a couple points that I had written down prior to this agenda item was in my support for such a plan was understanding the feasibility and really the realistic options in creating such a plan. Will such a plan or options require federal state approval? We all know that they'll require some level of a federal approval, and so understanding that process and educating local residents and even our board as to how long that process is going to take is important. And then finally, associated costs to our county and to our taxpayers, because in the end we can go through all of this and realize this is a price tag we can't afford. But those are things, I think, especially the cost is something that will come to light as we start to develop a plan. And one other point I wanted to make, I made reference to this article, I got my blood boiling, and one point that hasn't been discussed, and I want to close this item with it, is the mayor was quoted in trying to advocate for some pointers as a campaign to get the reservoir open. The article states if they don't open the gates, what should we do next? What would happen if 100 people showed up with their fishing poles and jumped the fence? You think the sheriff is going to arrest 100 people? Velasquez intimated that the sheriff would most likely not take action. Let me repeat that. Velasquez intimated that the sheriff would most likely not take action if the group included supervisors and 2 hopeful politicians. Without a big enough group, they can pick us off, he said. A big enough group changes all the dynamics. The sheriff won't want to get into the middle of it. All the feds, are the feds going to do something about it? I would hope the feds would do something about it. I think if the Occupy Oregon taught us anything, is that when you resist the federal government, people can get hurt, as I believe a couple people died in that whole fiasco up north. Would our sheriff get in the middle of it? Absolutely. I hope that the sheriff would uphold the Constitution he swore an oath on and would arrest all people that broke the law. And the only thing I have to close this is, above all, we must approach this issue with absolute responsibility. And I refuse to endorse a militant call to arms, coordinated fence jumping, coordinated trespassing, and blatantly breaking the law will provoke only chaos in San Bernardino County. And it will ensure that nothing will ever get done, or certainly it will make our jobs of making some progress at this reservoir very difficult to achieve in working with all the partners that we need to work with. And so with that, I want to thank all the residents for being here. I want to thank the board. And with that, we'll close this item. Are there any other comments from the board? No. Okay.
Thank you to
Thank
staff.
you. And yes, I really want to thank staff for the great presentation and for the other agencies that were here.
Thank you.
So we're coming back at 1:30.
Mr. Chair,
Yeah.
we have a time frame here. We have our next speaker has to leave, so we're hoping that the board can stay for this one last item before
We
lunch.
can take an hour for lunch.
An hour for lunch after. Hopefully, it's okay with the board, and that's still our public hearing, item 21. So
Yeah, let's
we
take
could
5
a
minutes
5-minute
and then
break.
we'll come back.
That'd be great. Thanks.
And Ray, these two items on my computer were
No, Shirley. Byron, excuse me.
So in June of 2014, the county received application for the Sunnyside Estates vesting tentative map, a general plan amendment, and zone change. In January 2016, the San Benito County Planning Commission recommended approval of the zone change and the EIR certification. I wanted to point out I mentioned the general plan. The general plan has changed as part of the county's general plan amendment. It's the 2035 general plan land use designation identifies it as residential mixed. This designation allows mixed-use developments that include residential, retail, and office uses, and allows single-family density up to 20 units per acre. The item before you today is the zone change, and as well as the environmental impact report. The project is intended to result in a 200-lot subdivision. So in order to accomplish that, the zoning needed to be changed from the existing ag productive to the proposed R1. This does conform to the residential mixed 2035 general plan land use designation. And as you can see, the surrounding properties are residential and agricultural uses. There has been some significant other development proposed for this area as well. This is the first one that we've processed, however. At this point, I will turn it over to Josh Janowitz from Rincon Consultants to get into some of the details of the project summary.
Thank you, Byron. The project includes 200 lots and 200 corresponding residential units on approximately 44 acres, with an average density of approximately just under 5 units an acre. The lot sizes would be approximately 5,800 square feet. And in addition, the applicant is proposing to develop 5.3 acres of parks and recreation. The roads and other ancillary facilities make up the balance of the project development area. Off-site improvements are also proposed along Southside Road, and interior infrastructure improvements include improvements to the water delivery system, the wastewater conveyance system. There is a sewer lift station proposed along the northern portions of the site, and also there are significant drainage improvements proposed on site as well. This project required the preparation of an environmental impact report, whose purpose is to inform the decision makers about potentially significant environmental impacts, to identify mitigation measures, to prevent significant unavoidable damage to the environment, and obviously to provide the public with an opportunity to comment on both the project and the environmental document that was prepared. The environmental impact report process started with the preparation of a notice of preparation, which was issued in September of 2014. The scoping meeting was held shortly thereafter. The draft environmental impact report was circulated in October of 2015 for the requisite period of 45 days, and the final EIR was released in January of 2016. All the environmental issue areas were addressed as part of the environmental analysis, as well as direct, indirect, and cumulative impacts. Within these environmental issue categories, Class 2 impacts were identified under aesthetics, ag resources, biological resources, cultural resources, geology and soils, hazards and hazardous materials, transportation, and utilities. And what I mean by Class 2 is those were impacts that could be mitigated after the imposition of mitigation measures. There were also significant unavoidable or Class 1 impacts identified as part of the project due to changes in the visual character, converting the project site from agricultural use to a residential use, the impacts associated with agricultural resources due to conversion of the ag land to residential uses. Greenhouse gas emissions were also found to be significant and unavoidable due primarily to the additional traffic that would be generated and as well as the energy use that would be provided. There is a significant or substantial mitigation program that is required to mitigate greenhouse gases, but due to the cumulative nature of the issue, it remains significant and unavoidable. Significant and unavoidable impacts also would result during construction of the proposed project. So on a temporary basis, we found that the existing residents would be impacted during demolition, grading, and construction for a period possibly longer than 12 months. With respect to alternatives, the EIR evaluated a reasonable range of alternatives, specifically the no project, no development alternative, the build-out under existing land use and zoning. We looked at an alternative that considered an increased setback along the northern property line to potentially reduce conflicts between ag uses and future residential uses. And also, we looked at a reduced density alternative. The alternatives analysis examined each environmental issue area in comparison to the proposed project and briefly discuss the alternatives that were rejected. The reduced density and build-out under existing zoning were considered the environmentally superior alternatives. However, they did not meet the project objectives, and therefore staff concluded that when compared to the proposed project, the project as mitigated provides a reasonable balance between satisfying the project objectives and reducing significant impacts to an acceptable level. The final EIR, again, as I mentioned, was released in January of 2016 and addressed comments that were received from Caltrans. As a result of this comment letter, we did make minor revisions to the draft EIR to clarify the Caltrans intersection significance criteria, to clarify the traffic impacts at the Union Road Airline Highway intersection, and mitigation measure timing. These amendments serve to merely clarify and strengthen the content of the EIR, and therefore recirculation was not required. The 2035 General Plan land use element requires that each project demonstrate that it will be fiscally neutral or have a positive impact on the county. As a result, staff met multiple times with the project applicant, and we've worked with the applicant to develop conditions of approval requiring the payment of all required impact fees and the formation of any special financing districts prior to the issuance of building permits. For board consideration, this condition has been added to a red line version of the ordinance, which was included in your packet under a separate cover, and this updated ordinance is also provided in the back for any members of the public who are interested in reviewing this ordinance. But in essence, with the imposition of this condition, staff feels like this project would result in a fiscally neutral project. And in closing, I'll hand it back to Byron just to wrap up, and then obviously we are all available for questions. Thank you very much.
So this has been thank you, Josh. This has been a team effort between planning, public works, now RMA, and the county counsel's office, as well as our consultants and the applicants throughout the whole process. The environmental impacts have been reduced to the greatest extent feasible. The project is located within an area of the county identified for future growth per the 2035 general plan, and the addition of the conditions in the amended ordinance that will ensure fiscal neutrality in the future. So it's staff's recommendation at this time that you conduct the public hearing regarding the environmental impact report and zone change petition 14-181, that you review the administrative record and the Planning Commission's recommendations set forth in Planning Commission Resolution number 2016-01, that you review and consider the zone change petition number 14-181, that you adopt the resolution, which is attachment C to your staff report, certifying that the EIR evaluates the impacts of development of the Sunnyside Estates project prepared pursuant to the California Environmental Quality Act and the county's local CEQA implementation procedures, adopt findings required by CEQA, adopt mitigation measures to reduce any significant environmental impacts where feasible, as recommended in the EIR, and adopt the mitigation monitoring and reporting plan, and adopt the statement of overriding considerations, and, number 5, adopt the ordinance as amended approving and adopting the zone change from the existing zoning map from agricultural productive AP to single-family residential R1 to ensure consistency between the county code and the project based on the findings and conditions of approval reflected in the board resolution and as recommended by the Planning Commission in Planning Commission Resolution number 2016-01. So I and the rest of the team is available for any questions. Pending the map, this is about the zone change, not about the map. If the zone change is approved today, the map will then go to the Planning Commission for their review and approval, and that is also where the bulk of the conditions of approval will be placed on the project. So we're available for questions.
Are there any questions of staff? Supervisor Barrios.
Yeah. And Byron, so the conditions of approval then with the map at what point does the development agreement come into play?
There is no development agreement for this project. It was discussed at one point, but there is no ordinance requirement for a development agreement, right, and the applicant did not wish to enter into one.
Okay, well, I'm just, I made the points earlier about affordable housing. Is there any way that they can maybe, as they go through the map, maybe build smaller units for affordability by design? Those things are really critical. So I was hoping that maybe that conversation would take place. I'm always concerned about ag to residential, so I just want you to talk a little bit about what that ag is being used for right now. And I believe nothing. So I want to make sure that that's addressed so that the community knows that this is not a flourishing ag, property.
Yeah, I'll let, there's some significant mitigation measures and conditions regarding the ag conversion. I'll let Josh go ahead and.
Yes, that's right, Supervisor Barres. The site currently, it's working. The site currently is fallow and has been used over the last 5 or 6 years. Has been used only for hay production. The site used to have a robust walnut orchard and was a significant producer of walnuts, but since 2006 that use has been discontinued and essentially is just used for low intensity hay production at this point. So again, not a flourishing sort of class 1 type agricultural production piece of property, and therefore I think as a result that's why the county's consultant and the county determined that the residential mixed was the appropriate land use designation for the site, which does allow, obviously, residential and a number of other uses.
Okay, and that's what makes me feel comfortable moving forward with this, is that it isn't a flourishing ag piece of property that is productive even at this point for vegetables and things of that sort. And the only other concern that I have is that I know that talking to the schools, it's not part of the what would you call it, environmental impacts, but it is going to bring 300 students per our average child per house. Is there any discussion with the schools for planning on how you're going to address? I'd like to know. I certainly, this has been talked about at intergovernmental, where the developer never really talks to the schools and vice versa. They don't know what's going on, and all of a sudden they have 300 kids that they have to house. So is there any plan to discuss that or to at least let them know?
We did notify the school district that this project was pending, and that started as part of the actual notice of preparation process. We received one letter actually very late in the process from the school district, which identified some of these concerns about funding. The issue, though, with respect to school Sorry. Maybe I need to speak directly into the microphone. Sorry about that.
There you go.
We consulted with the school district early in the process. Hopefully this is better. Consulted with the school district early on in the process. We didn't receive actually anything from the district during the initial notice of preparation time frame, but we did receive a letter late in the process that expressed some concerns about school funding. We did analyze impacts to schools as part of the environmental impact report. There is actually a section in the guidelines which require consideration of school impacts. We did identify these as potentially significant and do require that the applicant pay the required school fees pursuant to SB 50, which does limit or essentially establish the payment of fees as acceptable mitigation to impacts to schools. And I know that the county is also going to be looking at this issue if and when it receives future applications for development in this area. So we feel confident that with the payment of fees, their impacts can be reduced to a less than significant level, and it's an issue that the county and the city will continue to deal with if and when future applications are submitted.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Any other?
I'm pretty concerned about the development agreement requirement we have for some, and for some we don't have it. I think we have to be very, very consistent as these projects move forward, and spell out, what the benefits are to the county.
Excuse me for interrupting you, Supervisor Patel. I just want to make clear there is no requirement that any applicant enter into a development agreement at the moment under our current ordinances. Entering into a development agreement the way our current ordinance is structured is purely voluntary if the applicant is willing to provide some services or some benefits to the county over and above what normally would be required. So the projects where we have had a development agreement has been because the applicant has voluntarily agreed to enter into the development agreement with the county. Obviously, they've gotten something out of it. We've gotten something out of it. In this particular case, early on, we did have a discussion with Mr. Brigantino and Mr. West about entering into a development agreement with the county. They chose not to do that. We have no legal way to force them into doing that. So.
Well, and that comes back to at the retreat when I said the M word, and for those, that's the moratorium word until we have this all worked out, because affordable housing is absolutely critical. We're allowed 200 houses come in. Not one of them will be affordable to a policeman or a fireman in this county or someone that's in the building trades. I also think it's useful to know when the park is developed. At what phase? Is it after the 100th building permit? That's a big part of a community, is to have the park. And, we without some of these things really spelled out, I don't know how we could say everything's neutral to, the people that live here already.
So if I could respond to those concerns, there will be a very lengthy and detailed list of conditions that are recommended to the Planning Commission to be adopted along with approval of the vesting tentative map. And a lot of those issues will be fleshed out that way. The requirement that this project be fiscally neutral was written into the project description and project objectives, and will be formed into part of the conditions of approval. I don't know how far along the drafting of those has come yet, but I mean, most likely along the lines of other similar projects recently, that they would form a CFD to ensure the fiscal neutrality elements. The affordable housing issue is not something that has been discussed, but we could raise it with the Planning Commission as a potential condition of
and
approval.
contrary, Ms. Murphy, the Planning Commission has raised that as an issue. I've raised that as an issue. I think other board members have, and I'm scared to death that we're going to have 4 more applications in that immediate area, and we're not going to build not one affordable unit or have revenue to look elsewhere for other alternatives, and it's done. We've just had a suburbia built, and the horse is out of the barn. So I want to address the rules up front so people know, and we want developers to make money. Nothing is more better than everybody being successful, but everybody needs to be successful.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I don't want to go too far off the subject of this public hearing, but I do want to kind of bounce off of what Supervisor Botello was bringing up. Can we have staff come back and let us know what an ordinance would look like with the mandatory development agreement at some future date?
Yes. Both the CAO, Mr. Barnes, and County Counsel's office have met repeatedly on this issue, and it wasn't, our last meeting wasn't that long ago. It was maybe a week or two ago, and Mr. Barnes, who is spearheading the ordinance change, could probably address it more closely, but we've had lengthy discussions about how our application ordinance needs to change, how the DA needs to be included in that, and as far as I know, they're working on it.
Yes, we are actively working on an affordable housing ordinance. We have our housing element is going to be going to the Planning Commission next week before it comes to the board, and that has a affordable housing component to it, which would then support the creation of an affordable housing ordinance, which we're currently working on. We hope to have some type of draft for the Planning Commission next week, and then fine tune it, and then have the appropriate public hearings for it. So that is something that is high on our. It's the top item on our list.
Any other comments from Board members?
Just one more comment, Mr. Chair. It's just that I urge the developer to really think about what the concern of the board members up here, that if there's any way you can incorporate, smaller units for affordability, we would encourage you. I know that we can't impose a development agreement because that's not part of the ordinance, but certainly you hear us out, and we feel that's a great need. So see if you can do something to help us in that respect.
Right, and I couldn't agree with that more. The one issue I have from the conversations I've had with my planning commissioner and from members of the community is we have a project before us, or we're going to have a project before us that lacks affordable units. And when we talk about affordability these days, we talk about our police officers, our firefighters, teachers. I work at Samuel High School full time, and I would have to say 80% of that workforce they rent. And they rent it out of the county, because they can't afford to live here. And so we're talking about housing for working professionals, that want to stay in this community that they serve. I think it's extremely important, not only for this project, but for all projects moving forward. And I think that, I think that's something that we need to achieve. At this time, I'll ask for public comment.
Marty Richard,
Open the public hearing.
Since this discussion came up in relation to this, I'll just pick it up right where you left it. The affordability issues within your purview. Development agreements are within your purview. And frankly, as a member of the public who comes here and complains all the time, I just found something else to complain about, which is I don't understand this ad hoc business every time a developer comes in, and I'm not here to protect the developers. It's your problem. It's not their problem. You've done a housing element every time you've done a general plan. And every one of them has got an affordability requirement in the housing element, and you put it in there because you can't even get your housing element approved by the state if it doesn't have an affordability element in it. And you know it, and I know it. So if you don't have an affordability regulation, that's because you don't have it, not because they don't have it. And if you don't have one on other things that you're supposed to have, it's because you don't have it. And if the impact fees aren't up to date, it's because you didn't do it. I don't get it. I sit here every meeting and we do the same thing. The developer comes and we go, please do this. And we really need affordable housing, and you have it within your power to develop that program, and you don't do it, and then you come in and you say, well, let's tell the developer we really need this. May I make a suggestion? Why don't you do your half of the work, and then they will have to do their part of the work. They won't have any choice. If you make a development agreement mandatory, they'll have to have one. If you make affordable housing mandatory, they'll have to do it. Let's do our part of the job, and maybe it'll be a lot easier to get other people to do their part of the job. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Marty. I've been instructed by staff I have to formally open the public hearing.
Oh, excuse me, do I get to say it all?
I would like to hear it again.
So consider the public hearing open.
That was is that S at the end, Marty?
They probably didn't get that on tape. That's the problem.
What was that?
So with that, I'll bring it back to this board. Any additional comments, questions?
No, I think we said what we have to say, and I think Marty's right, but I think we've given direction to staff that we want to move in that direction. It's time.
Yep.
Okay, so now I will, having just recently opened the public hearing, I will close the public hearing. All right, so I'll leave it to the board to provide some direction to staff.
I will make a motion to approve per staff recommendation.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries 5-0. So we will break for lunch for until 2:15.
2:15? Okay. We're going to have a long day today.
No, when we get back.
Yes, I agree.
2536, 2% salary increase effective the first pay period following October 1st, 2016. In lieu of leave cash out of up to 25 hours for the first full pay period of February 23rd, an additional 25 hours in lieu leave for the first pay period following July 1st, 2016. Also, to add to that, the officials would be contributing 7% of salary towards their pension, and as well as the medical eligibility capping county's contribution to 70% for regular county contributions at 65 years of age. So, with that being said, most of the items that we talked about at the regular board meeting, I think, looked like there was something that we would probably move forward with. However, there was one item that still remained an issue, and that was the longevity. Staff, since the meeting, actually looked into longevity and the ability for elected department heads to actually have longevity. There are a few issues. One was time. The elected officials were requesting having an increase in longevity after a first term, which was an issue because I believe it's after 5 years, so that would not work, as well as the allowability due to the pension reform that went into effect January 1st of 2013. So that is a question right now that staff has out to CalPERS. We still have not received any feedback. So at this point, looks like we'll be coming back to the ad hoc committee, meeting with the supervisors, Supervisor Robert Rivas and Supervisors Margie Barrios, as well as the elected officials and staff at a later date, and probably come back at another board meeting. So,
thank you, Sir. I really can't add anything else, but we will, once we get the information from CalPERS, we will meet in committee again, and then we'll bring back any and all findings to the full board to see what direction the board wants to move in. So.
Thank you. Yeah, we were hoping that today we would have some information from CalPERS, but obviously that didn't happen. But the elected are patiently waiting to see what they tell us we can and we cannot do. But I have to say that all but the longevity things that were presented to the board, we felt were equitable with other bargaining units, and so we were comfortable moving forward with those. But we need to finish this one piece, and that is the longevity and how we're going to address it. So we'll come back.
Any comments or questions from other board members?
Yeah, CalPERS must have been busy mismanaging our money.
All right. With that, I'll open it up to the public. Any comments from the public? Seeing none, I don't think that this item requires any action, so we'll move on to item 24. County Administrative Office.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yes, this item as well was created by your board, created an ad hoc finance committee, and this particular item has the makeup of Supervisor Botello and Supervisor De La Cruz and staff, and Mary Lou Andretti, as well as Joe Paul Gonzalez. The ad hoc met yesterday to have a meeting with the B of A, and the reason for the meeting was to receive confirmation if we were actually not going to continue with B of A. That was the main reason why, just due to the timing and the amount of work and effort that would go into moving forward with the new bank with an RFP, as well as installing the software to make it compatible. So the ad hoc actually met with Patrick. He's an employee with B of A, and he explained some of the reasoning and some of the concerns that we actually had initially. Staff did, and the elected officials as well, concerning small counties actually leaving B of A. And actually this was the reasons why were because of federal regulations. There were approximately about 38 regulation changes for globalized systemic banks. This basically means that if there is a large bank, a global type bank, that actually might fail, it would trigger a financial crisis globally. So Bank of America actually falls under that category. So one of the changes that this actually requires is that they need to put up collateral. The money that we have in the bank, they put collateral. So you can imagine the amount of collateral they have to put up for all of the counties, and they're top heavy when it comes to county government. So with that being said, we actually discussed, if we were going to be on the chopping block, and he actually said not the first round, but we were scheduled for the second round to be on the chopping block. So with that being said, we also actually have our contract ending in June 30th, 2016. So that was obviously some concern for us and staff. But they were actually willing to extend or amend the current contract for another 6 months, allowing us the ability to actually move off of B of A and give us some time to do it. One of the comments that he made, there was not going to be a line in the sand if we weren't able to do it or be timely. They would work with us, and I vividly remember the comments that our tax collector treasurer mentioned, Mary Lou Andretti, that we've been a customer for 30 years. So obviously they're willing to work with us with that. The other thing is they're also going to be providing an RFP, a template with the services that we actually have. So it's going to be much easier for us to go out for RFP because we'll have that in place. So with that, that's more or less it. I did want to highlight to the board one thing, that there is going to be a lot of work ahead for staff. Make sure that the board's aware of that. And also, too, there may be some cost to develop our current system to accommodate the changes. So I just wanted to make sure that the board was aware of that. As we delve into this a little bit more, we'll probably bring this back to the board during the budget process. Just make sure you're aware of that.
Cool. All right. Are there any questions or comments from board members? Supervisor Munzer?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I guess my only question would be, in this process, is it going to be looked at whether other counties use multiple banks, other small counties? Let me phrase that.
Actually, that question was brought up. I don't know if the ad hoc wants to comment on that, but we had asked about that, and the conversation was no, they wanted to go with one bank, and there was only going to be one bank. But I don't know if there was anything else to add to that from the ad hoc.
Well, during my exposure to this issue and problem with B of A and the complexity of moving our, accounting systems and so forth and working with another financial institution, maybe we would be duplicating a process that might not be cost effective for the size of business that we have. I think the CAO, he pretty much laid it out, pretty much of the conversation that we had yesterday, and we certainly don't want San Bernardino County to be kind of triggering a worldwide financial collapse. So,
you mean when we do pull all of our money out of Bank of America?
Yeah, we're pull all our money out of Bank of America just to make sure that they're able to sustain themselves. But but it is speaking with the treasurer and the auditor and the administration, it is a process to switch banks. And Supervisor De La Cruz and I, we've been happy with Bank of America. We've been there for 30 years. Do we really need a change? And they insisted that it's time to start looking, and they were very cooperative. I appreciate Mary Lou's efforts in with Patrick and making sure that we're allowed the time to switch over, and so that's what we'll have to do. And it's a huge inconvenience, probably a lot more work for the folks that manage our monies, but it needs to be done.
Thank you, Supervisor.
Mr. Chair, I got out when I went into this committee. I wanted one question answered, and Mary Lou and the gentleman on the phone answered the question, is that we still had some time, and like Gray said, it's not a line on the sand. There's flexibility, and that was the most important thing for me, is to hear that. And so I said, I'm comfortable. I told Mary Lou, good job, thank you, I'm ready to go. Let's move on. Let's move on to the next hot issue that we need to address. And so I feel comfortable that in the next couple of months we'll have things and settle that we can actually start looking at other banks. So I'm good, Mr. Chair.
Supervisor Barrios?
Yeah, my first reaction was to, just, do it. Get away from them. They don't want us. Let's just go find another place. But I say we use the time to our advantage. We're going into budget hearings. Mary Lou's tax time, collecting taxes is coming up next month, or even now she's in there. We really don't want to put that burden on staff at this time. Let's use the time they've given us, and if we have to ask for more time, we'll do it and look more into moving away during the summer when things are a little more at ease with for our staff.
Thanks. Through the chair, Joe Paul Gonzalez, County Auditor Controller. I was hoping, because I was unable to be at that meeting yesterday, I was really hoping that the bank did not have San Benito County on the chopping block for terminating services, because it's a lot of work to change banks. The check stock all has to be tested. Everything has to be changed as far as the check stock. All the bank accounts have to be changed. With the IRS, with the state of California, with CalPERS, and that process is a very labor-intensive process. Very, a lot of technical help is needed for that process, and coordination with the new bank. So this RFP that goes forward, it really needs all the time that's available to us right now to get started as a time is of the essence project, because the lead time that we need is 9 months to a year to fully implement what we need to get done. So I really would like to express the urgency of this item. That and I'm very happy that the Finance Committee was put together to ensure that this process is going to have the priority that it needs to go forward.
Yes, we can't iterate enough that we need to keep working on this and working on it hard. It was very helpful that Bank of America is offering a template for the RFP process, which I think other counties have been using as well and might be ahead of the curve from our understanding. But we need to continue to work diligently, because 9 months is not quite long enough. A year would have been better, and a year is probably working our tails off.
Mr. Chair,
Barrios.
could we go back to Bank of America and give them our timeline and tell them that we need this much time, that after full discussion and review and everything, that we need, we're in March, that we need till March of 2017 to complete the process, give them a heads up, kind of put ourselves in a position where we don't have to at the last minute be going to them and asking for an extension. So why couldn't we do that? We have been a customer for 30 years.
I think Mary Lou, she was on the phone call too yesterday, and it was made very clear to us that they were willing to work with us.
Okay.
And
right.
I think as long as we're performing on our end too.
My staff had already started working on an RFP. The template is coming after the fact. We're going to review it and look at it and see if we can use that one or ours
or put them
that
together.
Already exists. We did do an RFP before, so it's not something new to us. And they did say they would extend it for the 6 months, and at the 6-month point, they would review with us. We could tell them where we're at with the RFP process and then decide to either extend or not. So, like Supervisor De La Cruz said, they're being flexible with us. So I think we just keep going. We're working on it already, and we're not going to drop the ball.
Good. Okay. Thank you.
At this time, I'll open up to the public for comments. Seeing none, I'll bring back to the board. I don't think it requires any action. So maybe we could if there's news from the ad hoc, if you guys meet again, just, we'll agendize it.
Yeah.
Okay, so item 25, Council of Governments, Ms. Gilbert.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair, members of the Board of Supervisors. Mary Gilbert, Executive Director of the Council of Governments, and I'm here today with two things for you. One is an update on the sales tax measure that the Council of Governments has approved, and we're also asking for action on the part of the Board of Supervisors to place that measure onto the June 7th election in San Benito County. So I'll start. I just have a quick presentation. I wanted to run you through the elements of the tax measure. As you know, we've been talking about this for probably about a year, real seriously now. We've worked with a group of community stakeholders, and the COG board has put in a lot of hours putting together what became part of our ordinance number 2016-01, which is the sales and use tax ordinance that includes an expenditure plan. So the elements of the expenditure plan, the proposal, this is a half-cent sales tax in place for 30 years. There are provisions included for independent audits and oversight, and the expenditure plan identifies that the funding will go to specific projects. The funding included is $240 million total is the estimate for the 30 years. The funding can be used to leverage or match other state and federal funding. The ordinance allows bonding against the funds so that we can hopefully move projects forward more quickly. And as far as the projects that are identified in the expenditure plan, we have a portion going to road repairs and maintenance, Highway 25 safety and congestion relief, and then local road improvements and other improvements such as bicycle and pedestrian safety and bus service. This is the breakdown for you. It looks like my slide here, unfortunately, is broken, so I apologize for that. But the road repair and maintenance, which is the kind of the light green color up there, is getting 30% of the funding, and that's going to be broken down between San Benito County and the City of Hollister, and then City of San Juan Bautista will also receive a portion. The half up there is the Highway 25 safety and congestion relief portion, getting 50% off the top of the funding. And then the local road improvements, including bicycle and pedestrian projects and potential transit projects, is getting 20%. This is just a list of the projects that are actually named in the expenditure plan. Highway 25, the goal is to improve safety and reduce congestion on the corridor. Again, the road repair and maintenance, which is 30% of the revenues going to each jurisdiction. And then the local projects that are could include the ones that are listed here, but they're not limited to those projects. And there are criteria kind of set forth in the ordinance as adopted by COG that projects would have to be consistent with the goals that are set forth in that ordinance to improve mobility in San Benito County. So that was all of my presentation. I just wanted to run you through that since we finally kind of nailed it all down in the ordinance. And I'd be happy to take any questions on that if you have any.
Thank you, Mary. Are there any questions from members of the board?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mary, what are you proactively going to be doing to engage the community, educate, and just, have town meetings and have people ask questions? We want that trust to start developing right away. And what can we do to help you besides what we may do today? Mm-hmm.
Well, we're working, we're doing outreach as much as we can, going to different groups to meet with folks and answer questions. We're making information available online, and we'll be increasing our social media presence for education about what the measure includes and answering questions and that kind of thing. And possibly maybe scheduling one or two public meetings where if folks have questions about what's included in the adopted ordinance, we could answer them.
There are a lot of stakeholders. I know you have a stakeholder meeting that you hold regularly.
Yes.
And I think you can expand from that. I know that there's business community leaders that are willing to help move this along. And so I think you will get the support of the community if it's done, right away. Well, you have been, and to continue that education.
Right.
So thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Chair. I just want to kind of make the comment that I believe Supervisor Bertello already reported out to this board that the Business Council, and I believe it was their full membership, voted overwhelmingly to support this, not just their board, but their full membership. And at the last Business Council, Judy Vieira reported that her chamber board voted to support this.
Good.
The stakeholders group, or a committee of the stakeholder group, is meeting with the consultant that they are hiring, and it's a very well respected transportation initiative consultant. So they've done a lot of work doing transportation initiatives. They're meeting with them this afternoon. So the stakeholder group has got, the consultant on board, and also are bringing up the money to fund the campaign. So everything's moving very well forward.
Yeah, one thing I'll add to Supervisor Munzer's statement is that it seems like labor is get behind this, especially the construction trades. So that looks pretty promising.
Good.
All right. At this time, I will ask for comments from the public.
Did you need to open the public hearing? No.
I don't think so.
Turn the recorder on. Marty Richa from Hollister. I have carefully reviewed the proposed spending plan and the half-cent sales tax. And personally, I'm going to support this because we have to have transportation here. It's vital for everybody economically, but it's more important for a county in our position because as shown by the earlier impact study, the weight of this county population-wise is 12 miles from Route 101, okay? Not that there's no one up there, but 90% of the growth forecasted for the county is going to occur in Zone 2, which starts, 4 miles or whatever it is from 101, but most of it's down here at 8 or 9 miles from 101. It's vital. I think the commitment to the spending plan was done very, very well. And through the miracles of modern science, you've probably never heard of this, called a smartphone. I just checked in with the Bureau of Economic Analysis, the U.S. Department of Commerce. So I didn't make this up. This is a government, and they never make anything up. We all know that. And the personal income that comes into San Benito County from commuters is a year, you may not know this number, in 2014, the last year they got it, was $909 million a year comes in personal income from our commuters. People who commute in here and take money home, take home about, and they come here to do work, and they do work on our behalf. They take home about $236 million in 2014. The balance, over $600 million, is a positive for San Benito County. So that's the personal income. That's the personal income our commuters bring in versus the personal income that outer commuters come in and take out because they live in Monterey County and work here and take the money home. And so more than $600 million. And the people who do that traveling need to get to work and they need to get back, no matter where they live. And so it's essential. And all one has to do is look on the roads during the harvest season of the agriculture. We talk agriculture till we're blue in the face. And all one has to do is look on the roads and see the trucks. And they use the little roads, too. They don't just use 25, and they don't just use 156 and 152. But you can see them on the back roads and trying to find shortcuts all the time, unfortunately. So we need this. We need the transportation. Much of it probably will happen. I won't be around to see it because it's going to be out there 30 years. And my plans don't go out that far right now. But we do need it, and I will support it. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mark. Any other comments from the public? Okay, I will bring it back to the board for action.
Mr. Mayor, I'd like to move to adopt resolution number 2016-12, calling for a special election for the consideration of measured number to be determined on June 7th, 2016 ballot, and consolidating the special election with the primary election, and authorize the chair to sign.
Okay, is there a second?
Second.
Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries 5-0.
Thank you.
Thank you, Louis. And thank you, Mary. For item number 26, I'd like to bring up the county clerk, auditor, recorder, Mr. Gonzalez.
Good afternoon, Chair, Board of Supervisors. The item before you concerns a request for a letter of support from the board to support any administrative and legislative efforts at the state level to require CalPERS to split off the trial courts, the operation across the street, from the county. In 2001, the legislation that concerning the separation of the courts in the county required that the one thing that could not be separated was that for CalPERS purposes, the county and the trial courts would be still considered as one entity. And as a result of that, the CalPERS only produces one report, one actuarial report that includes all the court employees. Well, that hurts California counties because, first of all, it overstates the assets and the liabilities of the counties that contract with CalPERS for retirement. And because of the new GASB pronouncements, especially GASB 68, which requires us to put now all of our net pension liabilities onto the balance sheet of our CAFR, that's kind of a game changer. Because if we go out and we wish to go out and procure external financing, they're going to be looking at that information. And because the courts are still part of our pension, we report it. We report them because we can't separate it. CalPERS is also not very good at being transparent about, like we tried to request information to try to manually separate the assets and liabilities, and they just don't cooperate. So what I'm requesting the board to do is to direct the chair to sign a letter of support for any sort of administrative or legislative relief that will either require CalPERS to create two actuarial reports separating the assets and liabilities of each agency, or to separate once and for all the counties from the courts. And that is the letter in your packet.
What other counties are involved in this? Is there a kind of a joint effort from auditors associations, or?
There is. The auditor controller from Sonoma County, I think as early as 8 years ago, was attempting to get individual county legislative relief, and it really didn't go anywhere. The administrative office of the courts have been the principal kind of roadblock from any sort of legislative relief. But we think that's changing now, especially since the auditor there and the auditor in Napa, they're looking at this trying to get support for this kind of legislative relief, and it caught the eye of the Department of Finance. They didn't realize that there was this last thing that was holding counties and courts together, so they're somewhat interested in the issue. So, and this is the reason why I'm before you today, is to kind of give them the little incentive that, hey, yes, San Benito's in favor of this. And the other CalPERS counties are doing the same thing as what we're doing here today.
So the question I have, Joe Paul, is the legislative relief has to come from legislation that will be generated through the Assembly or Senate? Or is it a fix that can happen?
It actually could come from the governor's office.
Governor's office, okay.
Through the insertion of the budget trailer bill or something like that.
Sure.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Any other questions?
Yeah. Are the courts fighting us on this? Are they objecting? Is it something we're going to have a battle with the courts on this? I'm just curious, not that it matters.
In the past, the entities that were not in favor of this type of legislative relief have really been the unions. But there's really no fiscal reason why the unions would have to worry about this issue, because the state's going to ensure that the courts are pretty much whole from a risk standpoint.
Oh, okay. So there should be no objection from them.
As you know, when it comes to any sort of business dealings between the counties and the state, it's generally the counties that end up, on the losing end of those negotiations. So I'm not too, I don't think there's really any sort of a real reason why the unions would be against this item.
Okay, and then the other thing is that there's been several attempts and they have failed, but I was going to ask what's different, but you answered that there's people now at the Capitol that believe that this is the right thing to do, and so it should be fine. Yeah. And then just one last thing is that we need to change the Honorable Luis Alejo is not the state senator. We need to change that. We've got him backwards. And then Honorable Anthony Canella is not the Assembly.
Thank you for finding. Yes, we are going to need you to donate time once you retire.
I don't want to offend them, Senator Luis Alejo.
I'm telling you, Joe. You're killing me.
Okay.
All right. Any other questions or comments from members of the board? Members of the public wish to provide comment? Now's the time to do so. All right. Seeing no public comment, bring it back to this board for action.
I'll make a motion to approve and authorize the chair to sign a letter of support for legislation separation of courts and counties for contracting agencies with CalPERS.
Second.
Okay, there's a motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye. Discussion, just one other thing, Mr. Chair, before we vote on it, is that we don't have CSAC on here, and they should be in here and we have to.
The letter is addressed to CSAC, isn't it?
Is it addressed to CSAC? I didn't pay attention
Yes.
to. Oh,
it
perfect.
is directed to CSAC.
Yeah, and Director of Finance is in there twice, so just wipe one out. But okay, that's all I had. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay. Does the maker of the motion, and you guys accept that?
I'm not going to. She should have done that before the vote was taken.
I didn't notice it until right now. Sorry.
Is the motion to direct the chair to sign a letter with Supervisor Barrios' correction?
Thank you.
With all of them.
All of them.
Can we do a blanket motion?
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries 5-0. Thank you, Joe
Thank
Paul.
you.
Okay, to go into our final item, item 27, I'd like to welcome Sarah to the podium. Take it away, Sarah. It's all yours.
I'm smiling again. hopefully this will be an easy one, knock on wood. So I'm asking for hopefully an ad hoc appointment today. This is about the outreach and education plan. I believe I attached the RFP in your packet for that outreach and education plan, which will include some workshops, 3 different workshops over a period of time prior to November, if not a little bit thereafter, but hopefully prior. So I'm looking for an ad hoc committee to help me. We did receive 3 proposals. Would like that ad hoc committee help me select, review, kind of get a cost estimate together of the different proposals that we have, so that staff, me, can bring it back. If not at the March 22nd meeting, I might miss the timelines, then the latest, the first meeting in April, so we can get moving here. If there's any questions, concerns, be happy to answer.
Are there any questions or comments from members of the board? Are there 2 supervisors willing to serve in on this ad hoc, this committee?
Don't make eye contact. I will volunteer.
Supervisor Barrios? Is there another brave volunteer? Mr. Dela Cruz.
Okay. I told you not to make eye contact.
All right, so Sarah, you have Supervisors Barrios and Dela Cruz.
Wonderful.
All right.
Will be painless, I promise. Thank you.
Sarah?
And
Pepperoni
so,
pizza, Sarah.
and so with that, I will...
to adjourn.
Yep. Is there a second? Motion and second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay. And we are adjourned until March 22nd,
Wow.
2016. And we have a special meeting next week.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you.
Have a good trip, Mr. Sullivan.
Thank you. Oh, yeah. I will.
Drive safely.
Okay.
Oh, God. Thursdays are free for me.